you bring the instrument closer to yourself, very close, maybe 1 inch away. So as I bring the instrument very close, it's going to have a different feeling. And when I come right next to the ear, it's going to have a different sound. When you start to bring an instrument like this close to your body or to someone else's body, it goes beyond the audible. Because you can hear it with your ears, but your whole body can feel it.
What's up everybody, AJ from Didge Project here. Didge Project is an amazing resource for how to play and utilize musical instruments for sound meditation, sound baths, sound healing, and any conscious use of sound. We have all sorts of demos and tutorials of instruments and how to play them. And we also have courses on how to play didgeridoo, do overtone throat singing, and how to improve your musical rhythm. So definitely make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, and go to our site didgeproject.com where we have a store. We sell all sorts of musical instruments, and we have lots and lots of resources on how to use them. Thanks again, and enjoy the rest of the video. Hello everyone, I'm AJ.
I'm Adrian.
And this is the Didge Project channel, and today we are interviewing this guy, Adrian, about his new book, Elements of Sound. Very excited to feature this and find out more about what's inside and how it can be helpful for all of you. So Adrian, welcome. It's nice to have you back.
Thanks so much for having me back. It's been great to be with Didge Project all these years, and here we are again.
So Adrian, as you may know, has been on our channel a number of times. He's made some very successful videos for us, demoing 10 different sound healing instruments, as well as his more recent video with us on how to facilitate a sound healing session. And he has this new book out, Elements of Sound, which I'm very excited about. And we want to find out from Adrian how the people in our audience can benefit from this, what's inside, and how it can empower our work.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for being willing to have me on. I definitely want to say that a lot of what's gone into making this book has come out of the connection that we've had over the years through the music that Didge Project has been making available to the world. And so, the full title of the book is Elements of Sound, a full spectrum exploration of sound and consciousness. So I think it's really to emphasize how do we relate to the instruments that we're playing, right? Because anybody can play a singing bowl. I always use the example, it's like I take a mallet, I strike it. It doesn't take a lot to teach the basic mechanics. But to make this become an instrument of healing or an instrument of meditation requires a lot more training. So the book is intended to shed some light on the inner process that a person is going through when they are conducting or facilitating healing and meditation work.
Cool. So, a lot of people on our channel play didgeridoo, play flutes, play bowls. We're facilitating sound baths. We're playing music with our friends. We're drawn to these instruments that have very rich overtones, that have, some very simple, yet they make complex sounds. And the quality of the sound of these instruments is what really differentiates them from, say, the standard Western musical instruments that a lot of us who grow up here in America and Europe and probably all over the world at this point are first exposed to. For example, my first exposure was piano and trombone. Those were the first instruments, the only instruments I really had put in my hands for the first 12 years of my musical experience. So, what are these type of instruments offering to new people who are just exploring music for the first time that's different?
Yeah, well, the instruments that you just mentioned, what we might call Western, classical, or jazz, common instruments used in those genres, are definitely capable of being sound healing instruments. And there are plenty of music therapists and others who are using them in those contexts. So it's not to invalidate or discredit them as tools. But these instruments are coming from a wide variety of cultures, some of them very ancient, and some of the instruments are more modern, like these tuning forks that are machine-made, or these singing bowls that are machine-made versus the older hand-hammered ones. So just by virtue of their being less common in our culture, we get the opportunity to be exposed to sounds which are very beautiful, but not as familiar to us. And that can it's like looking at a painting or some work of art from another culture. You've just traveled to a distant land and you've set your eyes on an architectural marvel that there's just nothing like that where you grew up. For many of us traveling from the United States, for instance, just to an old European town, it has a mystique, it has a resonance that kind of awakens something in us from a different time, from a different place. So there's that aspect. But I would say the more salient aspect is that most of these instruments are designed by people with a very prayerful intention or a conscious intention to use the instruments in a healing way, in a meditative way, and in some cases in a ritualistic way. So however that they're designed, that's going to be lending a clue as to how they're used and why we respond to them with such depth. Because in some cases, again, like a didgeridoo, these instruments have been in use for tens of thousands of years, probably since prehistoric times. We don't really know how old an instrument like that is. Flutes themselves are known to be at least 40,000 years old and made out of mammoth ivory bones and other types of bones. An instrument like this overtone flute is very simple to play because you don't even have to use your fingers. You just blow into it, and how hard you blow is going to affect, well, whether the note is higher or lower. So this could have been learned just by imagining a reed standing by the river, blowing in the wind, and the sound of the whistling through the reeds is already teaching prehistoric man how to make the instrument. So when it's something as primal as that, I think it also helps for people to connect to the primal elements of life, the wind, the rain. You know, again, like an instrument like this, perhaps even in conjunction. It inspires the imagination to get a little closer to nature right away. So the structure of the music being so atmospheric, elemental, primal, it also gears us more towards a state of listening, which is less based on melody and harmony, like a catchy tune or something familiar, and it just brings us into a zone, into a space, and that has a different sort of effect on the psyche.
Right. With a lot of these instruments, you're not learning it by having a sheet of music put in front of you. It's kind of like you get it put in your hands and someone might show you a few techniques, but then it's really up to you to explore. You know, there's tutorial videos, or you could find someone who knows how to play it really well, but you know, like a Tibetan singing bowl, these are hand-hammered instruments. The one, this big one here I'm looking at, you can see the hammer marks on it, and it just gives it such a unique resonance. And one question that really is coming up for me is like, why, and I'm asking you because you're one of the people that I know who's done so much research on this topic. You know, why are these harmonically rich instruments where you have different harmonics and different overtones coming out, you know, based on the intensity of play or other manipulative factors, why are they so interesting to the human ear, and why are they allowing people to go into deep relaxation or deep states of listening?
Yeah, there is a lot of science behind frequencies, and it is important to note that, you know, all instruments create overtones. The fundamental is just the primary note that we hear. The overtones are always present, but they're less clear on some instruments. So a beautifully made instrument, people often use the example of like a Stradivarius violin or, you know, a Steinway grand piano or something. They're so well tuned and so well balanced in their design that you hear all of the overtones a lot more. A beautifully made guitar, anything. It's a sign of the exquisite care that the designer put into making it. And then every human will hear that, whether they consciously or unconsciously notice that that's an exquisite instrument. They can detect it. So you don't have to know anything technically, but you just feel it. And it's because of the richness of the tones that are more even across a fuller spectrum. If you imagine that that's just giving you more information to process, and the brain is taking all that information and trying to make a meaning out of it, but this sound goes beyond rationality. It goes beyond intellectual understanding or scientific explanations of why do we feel the way that we feel. It's a meeting place between our emotions, our psychological state, and then the physical stuff that's happening, because there's always a physical component to the sound. So we can say that the design of the instrument, which is more conducive to producing overtones, is coming with the physical design of the instrument. The emotional capacity of the person to become receptive to the sound, that's a different thing. So we have to train ourselves as receivers, because even something like a drum, we could say, oh, this drum has such beautiful overtones and everyone is, getting into the zone with this. But that's only true for people who are receptive to a drumming. There are many examples where people automatically associate a drum with something savage or something blasphemous or something, and it can be tied to a lot of other connotations. So it's context dependent, whether or not we are positive or negative or neutral in our reception to a sound. And that's a little bit harder to unpack, But the brain is capable of understanding way more information than we give it credit for. And so the complexity of the sound is also resulting in a more complex mental process to kind of integrate that sound into the self, which when something that complex is being integrated, it can help us to bypass our mundane thinking and just like pay more attention for a moment so that all of our senses can absorb what's being received. And that can help us meditate.
Makes perfect sense. So your book starts with a section on the metaphysical. When we're talking about metaphysical, we're talking about, my understanding of it is our capacities to reach beyond the physical plane. The psychological realms, the psyche, the other dimensions, if you want to picture it that way. And, why start your book that way? What are you guiding people into in this section here?
Well, through all my meditation on sound and music over the years, one thing that has become really obvious to me is the importance of penetrating silence. So silence is the birthplace of sound, the mother of sound. That's something that one of my maestros, Tito La Rosa, the person who taught me how to play these flutes, and one of my guides along the way, he says that every time I see him to groups of people. And so I really needed to think about it. What is the silence where the sound emerges from that place? So first we have to get in touch with the polarity of sound and silence and realize that they're not separate, and that the extent to which we are silent is the extent to which we can hear. And so we need to start there. But we can't really talk about silence. It's something that's already metaphysical because it defies words. So how are we supposed to talk about it? And actually, maybe I can just read a brief section right from the beginning of the book.
Please.
Silence, like the symbol zero, is an elusive principle. As darkness cannot be seen, silence cannot be heard, much less discussed. At best, our words echo the indescribable, like dust cast in the air to reveal the light beam of a projector. The nature of silence is not defined by what we say about it, but rather how we experience it through contrast. Silence exists in a sonically saturated universe, and is therefore relative to sound. So when I first started writing the book, I noticed that I was being reminded of the Hermetic principles and the writings of the Kabbalion from the Three Initiates. And if you're familiar with that text, I definitely recommend that you check it out. But if not, there are laws of polarity, laws of rhythm, laws of harmony. These are the main sections of that book. And I realized, well, that's exactly what I want to be talking about. And so my meditation brought me to these polarities. Why is it called the elements of sound? Because I'm trying to break down a very vast topic, which has so many possible talking points, into something more fundamental, more graspable. The book is intended for all people, not musicians, not sound healers. But if you are a musician or a sound healer, even to an advanced level, the book should offer a gem for you along the way. And so these Hermetic principles help us to understand, okay, rhythm is at play. Well, when you think of a computer, you have ones and zeros, on and off, lights. That same duality is at play all across our technology. So when we're using sound, it's the same. It's not just the sound we're making, it's the sound we're not making. The silence that we leave between the notes. It's the instruments that we choose to pick up, but what does that mean? Every other instrument you chose to leave on the table. So in reality, there's more silence involved than sound in the music making process. The human can only hear between about 20 hertz and 20,000 hertz, but the sonic information in the universe is way beyond that. So most of what we hear is just a tiny fraction of what is there. So for me, that means that most of what we're hearing is silence. And we're just hearing some frequencies that we're attuned to. So I needed to start from this more metaphysical place in order to get people to consider what is it that we're talking about when we're talking about sound. Are we talking about audible sound? Because that's a very limited thing. But if we're including, for instance, the sound of our own thoughts, which may not be measurable in terms of hertz, maybe it's measurable in electromagnetic waves or something else, but if we can think that the words that we think constitute sound, we can approach the topic with a much vaster worldview. So then we focus in more on, okay, what is sound in the physical world? What is sound in specifically the world of music? Because music is already very limited, right? Sound is the wind blowing, the waterfall, the thunder, the cars in the street. It's talking. It's not just music. We've tried to define music since the beginning. We still don't have really a definition of music. So it needs to be placed in that context, which is much bigger than music itself and bigger than even frequency theories about physical sound.
So another thing you have a great background in is music theory, as you're an excellent guitarist, I would say, a master guitarist, without lying at all. And there's a part of musical theory in this book. So for someone who maybe doesn't have background in that, it might be an introduction to some basic principles of, just what notes work together. I get all this type of questions all the time. Which singing bowls would work together? Or which rav drum works with what other hand pan? And that just pretty much can all be derived out of a basic knowledge of music theory. Knowing your major and minor scales and chords will get you the answers to all those questions which I just listed. So, what's here music theory-wise for people who are getting into sound healing and sound work?
Yeah, I've encountered a lot of resistance to music theory from people. It's worth noting at this point that I started playing music when I was about 11, and I was continuously under a teacher, a guitar teacher, for the first year and a half, and then after that I switched to who would become my professor of jazz guitar, and I studied with him for almost 10 or more years. I consider him my teacher for life. There's always more that I can learn. And music theory is a language. It's a way of becoming literate. And if we compare that to global languages, we can understand that literacy is not necessary in order to speak. You do not have to know music theory to be an excellent musician. You don't have to read music to be a sound healer or any type of musician. So I already qualify it with saying, look, if you're not interested and it's not something you want to learn about, it's not going to prevent you from becoming great. However, literacy has proven many benefits to our culture. And you can then become self-educated in ways that are much easier when you are literate. If you are literate, you can read a book about any subject. You don't have to find someone who's able to speak to you on the subject. You can go to a library and research it. You can read a recipe book and cook something out of the recipe book. So the literacy, if used properly, should enable us to free ourselves from our own limitations by understanding what are the techniques that I'm using and what other techniques are out there and how can I incorporate them. What are the note choices that I'm making, and what other note choices could I be making? How could these things fit together? And then when you understand that there are different music theory systems, then you're not limited by the system. The system is just a language. You can speak French, and you can say all the things that you want to say in French. You can then speak Chinese and say the same things you need to say. The connotations are different. The cultural affects and other considerations that are less tangible are part of that. That's the cultural part. But the capacity of different languages to express more or less the same thing is the universal part. So I considered this section of the book to be an introduction to the universal principles of music that are found throughout the world, such as notes. We all have notes. What is a note? It's a stable frequency that we decide this frequency is the note that we want to use. And we tune an instrument and it makes that note. So any culture that has an instrument has a tuning of the instruments. Then an interval. An interval is just the distance from one note to another. A note can go up, or a note can go down, or it can stay exactly where it is. Those are the three possible movements. There's no other movements that I'm aware of for a frequency to go, up, down, or stay where it is. And then we talk about bigger structures, like chords or scales, common scales that we find all over the world, such as the pentatonic scale. This pentatonic flute, it has 5 holes, 5 notes primarily that it makes. And this scale is universal. I've studied deeply the music of different folk cultures from all of the continents where music is made. Maybe we'll find some Antarctican music eventually, but for now, all of the other continents use this scale. So the music theory is just attempting to organize what's already happening in human culture and explain it. So obviously the music came before that. We've come up with a system, it's relatively modern, but it still has relevance to us. So I put it towards the end to indicate that it's not the primary question. The primary question again is, how am I relating to sound with my consciousness? Why am I using it? What am I listening to? What am I expressing? And that should help us to become more cognizant of how sound is impacting our lives on a daily basis.
I've personally had a lot of experiences as a listener of sound and as someone playing sound, making sound, so you could say leaving my body, or you could say, going somewhere else, just leaving the physical realm behind, so to speak. And I just want to know, from your understanding, what's happening there? Where are you going? And is that beneficial? Which I think it is. But if it is, why?
Yeah, I think that in our world, especially through the type of science that we've been developing in our culture for the past few hundred years, and really going back to Greek times and the Egyptian predecessors, there's a certain lineage of science that we've been caught in, which has a tendency to compartmentalize and dissect things to try to understand them, which is great. Okay, I want to understand just how do the blood cells work. I want to understand just how does the heart work. What are the veins? So then we're trying to put together a complete understanding of all these different components. But when we do that to the human spirit, it gets a little bit tricky because we're saying, all right, this is my emotion, this is my thoughts, this is my spirit, if we are even willing to use that term, because a lot of people are not interested in talking about spiritual things. They prefer a more materialistic thing. But the fact of the matter is, inside of our own experience, each of us has to deal with these realities. And we have dreams, and we have visions, and we have aspirations. We have things which don't feel so good and things which feel good. So in our culture, we are figuring out how to integrate all these parts of ourselves, right? Because the external world is providing us with a lot of stimulus, and we're reacting to that stimulus. So somebody honks at you driving in traffic. You can get angry about it. Is that going to change anything? Probably not. You're just going to feel bad. And so those of us who have done a little meditation in practice realize, all right, I'm going to overcome my tendency to be irritated by that thing, right? So then slowly we detach from the conditions of our physical daily lives being what controls our inner state. So in order to develop greater control of our inner state, then there are other sciences. There's the science of meditation, there's the science of yoga, there's the science of nutrition, and how all of these things holistically combined create a better psychophysical state, psychophysiological state. So it doesn't negate any of the parts. We say, yes, I have a physical body, and I need to take care of that. I also have a mental state, and I need to take care of that. And I also have an emotional state. And I can train my emotions, my mind, and my body to serve better how I want to experience life. So sound meditation gives us a space in which to practice all of that. We can practice relaxing the body, because that's a very common thing to do. You get the person there, they lie down or they sit in a chair. You guide them through some type of what's called yoga nidra or guided meditation to relax their body, mind, heart. And then from within that space, they become more receptive, kind of let go of the outside world. This is what I've been doing all day. These are the things I'm constantly obsessing about and worrying about. And then they can get in touch with something a little deeper inside of them that may be hidden under the surface of I'm so busy all the time. I have to take care of the kids. I have to take care of my job. I have to take care of whatever that it is. That's the primary focus of the brain. But underneath it all is a deeper connection with why we want to live our lives. What do we want to do with this time? We don't know how long we have. Maybe we have fears about our own mortality. Maybe we have hopes and aspirations that we feel we've been neglecting for some time. Then the sound meditation may open up the ability to confront and encounter a deeper part of ourself. I think that that's how it's working. So if you're having an astral projection, some call it, or a visionary state, because all of this technology will definitely cause those types of reactions in the self. We could go further into how that works and everything, but I think the easiest way to explain it is that the brain has more parts that are activated at once through music making and music processing than almost any other activity. So just by engaging consciously with music, your memory centers, your linguistic processing, the auditory complex, the secretion of hormones through the endocrine system, which is also connected to the breathing patterns and the oxygenation of the blood, like all of that is there, physical explanations as to what's going on. But giving ourselves permission to relax and to receive and to encounter our intentions and really like be receptive to that process, then that can take us into some pretty mystical places. It doesn't mean that there's not an explanation, but it's harder to pinpoint. That's the metaphysical part.
You were showing me an excerpt from your book about some of the different musical instruments.
Mm-hmm.
So let's hear that.
Sounds good. So this excerpt is taken from the chapter called What is Sound Healing? And then I kind of give the answer right away. I say the art of balancing vibration. There are so many different traditions and cultures throughout the world. This technology does not belong to one culture, but different cultures hold different keys to it. So I just wrote this bit of a synopsis. And it says, innumerable instruments are used for sound meditation. Some of the most common being the human voice, drums, rattles, flutes, chimes, Himalayan and crystal singing bowls, gongs, tuning forks, harmoniums and shruti boxes, didgeridoos, stringed instruments, and more. These are the scalpels and anesthetics of a sound healing facilitator. Today, electronic instruments and body scanning technologies are also used to administer specific frequencies and measure electromagnetic responses throughout the brain and body. Beyond human technology, sound meditation can also involve environmental sounds such as wind, rain, thunder, ocean waves, fire crackling, animal calls, and various sources of noise, such as white noise machines. Furthermore, many sound meditations involve a variety of vibrational therapies, including candlelight, herbs, perfumes, and other sensory factors which contribute to the atmosphere of the experience. Sound meditation is not merely a passive process. It may involve a person actively using their voice, playing instruments, or focusing the mind on specific thought forms, such as mantras, affirmations, or subjects of contemplation, such as impermanence or the nature of the self.
Beautiful. So those are a lot of the different instruments we sell in the Didge Project store. So it's a wonderful quote.
We sell them because we use them.
But yeah, it's true. There are actually a number of instruments that we don't sell in the Didge Project store that are for sound healing. For example, getting a hand-hammered Himalayan bowl, you're not going to be able to find that a lot of places because each one is unique, and you can't mass produce it and you can't mass sell it very easily. There are machine-made ones now, but they're not going to be as unique. And with the hand-hammered instrument, for example, you're going to get unique tones coming off of it that's going to be very hard to replicate. So there's a lot of tools in our palette that are just not easy to find. You're going to find these more when you go to musical instrument stores. Himalayan stores or Tibetan stores often carry instruments like that. And you never know where you're going to find something like some bells or chimes or whistles, rattles. You can find the coolest little knick-knack sound makers in a gift shop somewhere when you're traveling or even in your own town.
I got a couple of those right here, yeah. This one was given to me in my travels in Poland. I never saw a circular rain stick before. And she said to me, when she gave it to me, this sound is the sound of the ice, the little thin ice that forms on the brook in the forest, melting in the springtime.
Wow.
That specific quality of water. And I feel that it does have that sound. When she said it, it made sense. Then this instrument, it comes from an ancient family of instruments known as bull roarers, but somebody designed this particular one and it's not common to find. So I even use a sound healing instrument that was a toy of mine when I was a child. It's a long tube with a spring inside of it and it makes like a crazy echo sound. So you have to be creative because there's a playful, childlike spirit that's involved in all of this. And I think we touched on it at the beginning, which is like how you don't need to read sheet music and become trained in an academic sense necessarily to use these tools, but you do need to have the spirit of creativity, curiosity, and playfulness. And then you develop a relationship with the instruments. And that relationship is, again, I think what the book is really talking about. How are we relating to sound? How are we relating to music? And how can we make that relationship more conscious? I think we're all pretty conscious about visual things. I want my clothes to look nice. I want my house to be clean. I want my objects to be beautiful. But we may not be curating our sonic environment with as much consciousness. And so this book is hopefully going to turn on those light bulbs inside of us to be more mindful of, oh, what am I hearing right now? What are the lyrics in the songs that I'm listening to? What are the words that, that my friends and family are saying to me? How do I apply that in my life? Am I taking that on personally, or am I integrating things in a positive way without becoming negative about what people say to me? And then mostly, what am I saying to myself and to others? And am I using my own power of language in a positive, creative way, or in what ways could I improve?
That's a great point about the sonic environment because, especially we both lived in Brooklyn, New York for a long time, and you might find a very noisy environment right outside your window. Opening your window might be a couple decibels louder than with your window closed. And so yeah, I mean, what advice do you have for people who are dealing with sound that's maybe outside of their control, but with the awareness of, what they're learning from elements of sound from this book?
Yeah, I think that one of the main takeaways here, there's two sections of the book that come to mind. One of them is about intensity and the relationship between sensitivity and intensity. So the more sensitive that you are, the more intense something might seem, because that's a trigger or that's something that you're very sensitive to. So then if that comes up for you, it's going to be like a big deal. Oh, they said that to me, and whenever somebody gets to me about that topic, I'm really sensitive. So then it becomes more intense. How do we reduce that intensity? We don't become insensitive, but we just recognize that those are areas for me that are sensitive. And how can I master my senses and master my reactions? Because the thing may continue to happen, but my reaction doesn't have to be the same. So there's practices of meditation. But the other thing, too, is to just look at how we make meaning out of stuff. Because if we're like, oh, the sirens are such a bad sound, and it's so annoying, and the train is so and then we just project onto that even more negativity. Like, that's not necessary. That's just a decision that we're making to make something which is already perhaps less than ideal, even less ideal. Because 2, 3, 4 people can go into the same situation and react completely differently to it, right? I mean, we could all come up with an example of something like that. Somebody can take a joke, the other person can't take the joke. Somebody can give the joke, but they can't take the joke. So we have to look at, where am I making positive and negative bigger? And that's, again, why, for me, healing and balance are so correlated, because it's out of balance. To be that negative about something, well, you have to live in the city, or you have to live far away from the city, because you could just as easily complain, I live in the middle of the forest and there's nothing to do and I have to drive 15 minutes just to get to the corner store. People will always find a way to complain about their circumstances, whether they have really good circumstances or really bad circumstances according to them. So we have to come to terms with our circumstances, and so that we can be in a more positive view of our lives. And then if there are actions that we can take to improve our lives, then let's take them. Am I in a position to move to a quieter neighborhood? Can I put some sound baffling in my apartment to make things less crazy? Then we can actually come up with tangible solutions for our issues. To that point, one thing also is like the protection of the hearing in the city. I always like to say this. Listening to in-ear headphones is the most damaging you could do. If you're going into the subway and you're putting in earbuds and they're close to your eardrums and you're blasting that to try to compete with the environmental sound, you're almost certainly killing your hair cells, which are allowing you to hear, and causing low-grade hearing loss over time. So for those of you who are in loud environments, urban environments, construction sites, I highly recommend wearing over-ear headphones or at least monitoring more closely the decibel levels of the music that you're listening to
Yeah.
so that you minimize hearing loss and damage.
Yeah, I definitely remember coming out of the subway once, having done exactly what you said. And when I got out to the street and it was much quieter, I was like, oh, this is so loud. I can't believe I had it so loud. And I became aware of what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
But another great tip for that is to just wear ear protection, like foam ear plugs when you're on the subway or something like that, because just the sound of the train, just the sound of loud street can be pretty abrasive if you're sensitive to it.
Yeah, so just to draw this distinction on this part of the conversation, right? Now we're talking about physiological sound healing, okay? This is like the following sounds can damage your body physically, and we need to be precautionary and take care of our physical bodies. The other part of the conversation is about our psychological relationship to the sounds that we hear. And so the book is helping to draw attention to that distinction so that as we go through life, we can be aware of like, okay, this is a psychological issue that I'm having, or this is an emotional thing, whatever piece of us is becoming dominant in that moment. And if it's our physical bodies, we need to take care of it. I've gone to a lot of sound baths where people are crashing on huge gongs, really loud, and doing that for a while. And I get that there are reasons why you might want to do that, but also from the perspective of the physiology, it can cause stress for the nervous system, and it can cause the hearing to be damaged. So for sound healers, that's something to consider too. Like, why are we bashing and crashing? And is that actually beneficial to the people we're serving?
Right. And
Yeah.
to that end, I had a workshop recently. I was instructing a group, and someone went up to a crystal singing bowl in a very quiet moment and struck it one time, but quite loud. And to me, it kind of like shocked my eardrums, and I was like, oh, that's too loud for people. But at a different moment, when there's drums going on, when there's a lot of intensity in the room, sonically speaking, striking that same instrument at that same intensity might be totally fine. So a lot of it is contextual, especially if you're holding space for people, making sure to understand the dynamic of what's happening, the process of working out transitions that are very smooth, introducing things softly and bringing the level up, and so on.
Yeah, one of the chapters in the book is about tension and resolution. So that's a little bit about what we're discussing here. Some elements cause tension and some elements cause resolution. So basically, accumulated expectation. You have an expectation that creates tension, and your expectation is not being fulfilled. When are they gonna, let me into my appointment? I've been waiting here, and you're tense because you have an expectation that's not being met. And then when it's met, it's like, okay, now we're done, And so with music, we have a lot of expectations too, that have been ingrained in us from hundreds and thousands of years of musical patterns that our culture has been, using and contacting with other cultures. Of course, there's been a mix of influences, but if you hear do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, it's the completion. So our musical choices have that architecture in them. There's the expectation, but sometimes it's the unexpected, which can be the best healer, because we are in a comfort zone. And so it's like everything's really quiet and everyone's in this really calm state. And then all of a sudden somebody crashes the singing bowl and somebody's like, oh, and then they're bothered by it, right? Now they have to confront their irritation and their reaction to that because they just lost their tranquility. So sometimes life gives us those opportunities. Like normally, maybe I wouldn't make that decision myself as a practitioner, but somebody made the decision in that moment. And now I have to see, how am I reacting to that? Can I regain my harmony as quickly as possible? And to your other point about like proximity of instruments, yes, that's something that, I definitely recommend in the book and that practitioners should do. And I think we talked about it also in the how to conduct a sound healing session, that sound is logarithmic and it's exponentially louder the closer that it is to your eardrum, which is related to that headphone conversation we were just having. So when you take an instrument, and this is your own instrument at home and you're just practicing, you play it and you listen to it from right here. And maybe you close your eyes. You see how long does the sound last? How quickly does the volume change? Is it dramatic or is it kind of sustaining? You listen to the quality of the sound. You see if I can describe the sound. Maybe it's warm, soft, gentle, whatever words might come to mind. Then you bring the instrument closer to yourself, very close, maybe 1 inch away. So as I bring the instrument very close, it's going to have a different feeling. And when I come right next to the ear, it's going to have a different sound. When you start to bring an instrument like this close to your body or to someone else's body, it goes beyond the audible. Because you can hear it with your ears, but your whole body can feel it. I'm sure you've all had the experience of going to a concert where the bass is really loud, or even just somebody driving down the street blasting music in their car, and you can literally feel it in your chest. That is what we're talking about. We're talking about the spectrum of the sound, which is beyond hearing, and starts to get into the somatic level, the body. And so this instrument especially is excellent for that. So I usually will place it, for instance, on the chest and strike it on the chest while the person is lying down. And then they're going to feel the vibration from the bowl passing through their rib cage, through their stomach, all their organs, and it's having a really strong somatic effect on the body. So it's important to experiment with proximity, combinations. That's why all these instruments that were mentioned and the ones that are carried by the Didge Project are complementary. They can be combined in many different ways. And the music theory part of the book should also shed some light on how to make those decisions, like what notes work with what notes, keeping in mind that all of those rules are culturally contextual.
So, you know, these instruments you brought here, and I know this is just a small little portion of
It's what we could fit on the table.
You have. You know, they're beautiful props, yeah. But they're all here for a reason because they have something to share. So if there's any one or a couple you want to play, and if there's anything that comes up that you might want to talk about with them, I think that'd be great.
Sure. We were talking a little bit about polarity and dualities, and I said when I started writing the book that I was influenced by the Kabbalion, and one of the laws of polarity in the elements of sound is high and low, right? So if you think about what do I want to be able to control if I'm going to control sound? Volume, how loud is it? Speed, how fast or slow is it? And then pitch, or the notes, is how high or how low. The highest pitch that we can hear, like I said, is around 20,000 hertz. The lowest pitch is around 20 hertz. So that's kind of the range. All these instruments exist within that spectrum somewhere. And so when I'm doing sound meditation, I've noticed over the years through my experiences, and I've brought this work to hospitals, children's centers, schools, all kinds of environments, senior homes. And when I use high tones, for one, we're accustomed to the bell getting our attention. So we listen, and that's when we can start to focus on letting the thought patterns dissolve. And we let that sound be like a palate cleanser for the ear. So the same way you get your sushi and they give you some ginger, I get the vegetarian sushi, but you know, they give you the ginger and you cleanse your palate between flavors. Then with the tingsha cymbals or bells of different kinds that have high frequencies, maybe also a tuning fork, I'll just use this as the... These frequencies are going to establish the upper floor of the sound. Then when I move to the lower tones, we have a spectrum here from low to high. And that's creating the width of the sound, in a sense, or the height of the sound. And then from there, I can fill that in with some middle frequencies. So just with myself being able to play these three instruments simultaneously, I can create a sound texture which has low, middle, and high frequencies. It's not particularly rhythmic yet, but I could also involve this type of a sound and let that, again, the more nature-oriented sounds come into the picture. Then I'm weaving things together in this way. Maybe I bring in a more melodic sound, since these instruments are fairly atmospheric, not particularly melodic. allowing a moment for the silence or the spaciousness to be there too. So that's just providing a little bit of a window into how we're filling space. It was Jean-Michel Basquiat who said that art is how we decorate space and music is how we decorate time. And one of the definitions of a melody is notes over time. So these are the notes, and time is just how we're using them rhythmically. Where are we placing them? How much space between one instrument and the next? So all of those elements are what we're discussing. That's why, again, the title Elements of Sound is calling attention to what it is that we're even trying to control in the first place. Because some of us don't know. We're very intuitive. We have a lot of skill. I think the people who are watching Didge Project videos, who are purchasing instruments, who are using them, are involved in a lot of different ways. Some people are using them for their own personal practice. I know that there's a lot of people that are, healing with sleep apnea and things like that, using the didgeridoo as a medical device. And others who have didgeridoos are using them in conjunction with handpans and shruti boxes and djembes and making music for drum circles, and maybe they're going to festivals, maybe they're concert musicians. There are so many different ways that people are using these same tools according to how it's serving them in their life. We're just trying to get more of a grasp over, well, how am I using it? What are my motivations behind using it? And what am I not considering, right? You don't know what you don't know. And so reading, encountering new information, different cultures, going to talks, going to concerts, going to sound baths, all of that helps you to acquire more information to consider.
So what comes up for me with all of that is, there's people in our audience who I know have actually a great deal of training with formal music education. I know there's professional musicians who may be watching this, very talented technical players on Western instruments who can read music, who know how to play jazz, classical music, you name it. And I know there's something in this book for those people, whether it's just deepening their practice or bringing their music and their practice of their instruments into a more spiritual level or a more connected level, or just bringing more awareness or consciousness. So if there's anything you want to say on that.
Yeah, I feel that this book can be read to the level of depth of the practitioner. So if you're totally new to it, certain things are going to stand out to you that are really helpful. And if you're already have a practice, you're going to find something to help you go deeper. And if you're already very deep into your process, then you'll still probably find new things to consider, or maybe some validations for the things that you've been observing, and hopefully also a tool to help you express what this work is to others. Because not everybody is necessarily good at explaining it. I encounter a lot of people who want to know, how does this work? What is a sound bath? What is sound healing? What is meditation? And I have to answer those questions. And we all need to figure out how we're going to respond, right? Based on who's asking us and the environment that we're in. So this book is designed to integrate the science, the spiritual parts, the metaphysical, the physical. And I have a unique experience because I've been through rigorous conservatory training. The Eastman School of Music was just ranked, I think it was number 11 in the world for musical institutions. And it was like the number 1 music school in the United States of America some years ago. That doesn't mean anything to the sound healing world, because being a great conservatory musician has almost nothing to do with being a sound healer. And being a music therapist is also its own whole other career track, which has specific regulations, panels, protocols. I exist somewhere in between all of these worlds, as many of us do. So my hope is that this book is going to empower people to have more confidence in what they're doing. Knowledge brings confidence. And so this information should take the work of a sound healer a little bit out of the whimsical, mystical, taboo that it's in for a lot of people, and help to make that more palatable to the broader culture. Because I think what all of us want is to go further with it for ourselves, but then eventually to help bring that to others. If this is something that you just want to do in your personal life, the book is going to help. But if it's something that you're bringing it to the world already, or you have the intention of bringing it to the world, it should give you tools to help have these conversations with the public.
I gotta ask, I think we can't miss hearing the wah-wah pipe. Would you do us the honor?
Why, of course I will. The wah-wah pipe, yes. You know, I trained for more than a dozen years to be a world-class jazz guitarist and understand the most complex music theory that I could, and still the people just want more wah-wah pipe. Just let it wash over you. Let it wipe away the pain, the confusion.
Just totally cleared my eardrums.
Crowd favorite. You know, I think the only reason they chose more cowbell is because they didn't know about the wah-wah pipe.
Right. Cool. Well, this has been awesome. I think that your book is very exciting. I'm excited to read it, dive into it, and get more tidbits out of it that I can share with others. And we're going to be selling this right through the Didge Project store. So you can go to the link below to order your copy, and we will mail it to you. And just want to thank you, Adrian, for coming into the studio and sharing all this beautiful knowledge with us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. And thanks to the Didge Project for all of the resources that you make available to people in the form of instruments, educational material, everything. So I'm looking forward to it. I think that the comments that we've gotten on our videos and the things people have shared, hopefully this book will answer some of those questions, because I know there's never enough time for all the things that we want to say and do. And I had to sit down during the pandemic, you know, that's when I finally had the time to actually sit and write a book. And so hopefully that will be a resource to give people more dimension of what they're looking for. Now we've got instruments, we got books, we got educational videos, so keep coming back to the Didge Project for more content.
So thank you all for tuning in. I want to point you all to the other videos Adrian has done for Didge Project. So check out this playlist here and keep tuning in to Didge Project for more great tutorial content and information to empower your sound. Make sure to subscribe to our channel if you haven't already, and like this video. That really helps us get more views out there. All right, take care. Have a good one.